It was supposed to be a simple toast, that's all. I watched him lift his glass, his voice just starting to rise above the quiet clink of silverware and the low hum of elite dinner conversation. And then I laughed. A full, open laugh, not at his joke because there wasn't one, but at the idea of him, of this man thinking he still had a place at that table. I didn't think about the timing, or maybe I did. It doesn't matter. All I remember is the way everyone looked when I stood up, walked behind the chair of the investor we'd been whining and dining for months, and settled on his lap like I belonged there. The table didn't fall silent. It laughed with me. Not out of cruelty, no, out of awkward complicity. "You don't understand the game of real men," I said to him, voice low, almost affectionate, but loud enough for everyone to hear. Let him talk. Even now, I can still see his fingers around the stem of the glass, not trembling, not clenched, just holding, then releasing. He placed it down, looked at me, not with anger, with stillness. He stood and said one sentence, "Game over." He walked out, leaving a silence even the laughter couldn't patch. The investor cleared his throat. My boss mumbled something about intensity. But my chest, it thudded like someone had just slammed a vault door shut, and I had the key in my hand, but no idea what it unlocked anymore. Hey, quick pause. If you're caught up in this story, hit like and subscribe. 97% of listeners don't, and it really helps the team keep these coming. Thanks. Now back to it. He didn't call that night or the next. I figured he'd gone to his brother's or maybe booked a last-minute room downtown. He'd cool off. He always did. That was the thing about him. He didn't explode. He evaporated, disappeared into his thoughts. I used to love that about him. Until that night when I realized I had no idea where he went when he left. Only that it was never toward me. By the third day I started to worry. His clothes were still missing from the closet. Not some, all. His laptop was gone, his cufflinks, even that old charger he always kept tangled near the nightstand. And in the kitchen, next to the espresso machine, a single manila envelope sat upright. My name handwritten on it. Nothing dramatic, just pen on paper. Inside, a quitclaim deed, notarized. My name now the only one on the house. His signature clean, dated a week before the dinner. That stopped me. I read the date again. A week before. He had prepared this before I'd even said the words. Before the laugh. Before the lap. Before I made him a joke in front of men he'd once hosted in our own living room. And then the note. "You like real men. Here's what one looks like when he leaves." There was no anger in the handwriting. Just precision. Like everything he did. Every gift he ever gave. Every list he made. Every problem he solved silently. He had dismantled our marriage like he was removing a faulty line of code from a system he didn't trust anymore. No speech, no warning, just gone. I sat on the edge of the bed for hours, staring at the nightstand where his book used to sit, The Myth of Sisyphus. I never understood why he reread it so much. Some existential thing about quiet persistence. I used to joke that it was too heavy for bedtime, but now I got it. Now I understood the weight. The next morning, my phone lit up with 229 missed calls, all from numbers I didn't recognize. His brother, our attorney, his office, even one from the garage where he used to take his car. I called his mother. She answered on the second ring, said hello, and then silence. A breath. Then a click. She hung up. The garage called again that evening. I answered. "Mrs. Ellison?" "Yes. Just letting you know he sold the Audi. Transferred everything last week. We won't need to build the joint account anymore." The joint account? I logged in. Empty. Not a withdrawal. Not theft. A legal split. Quiet. Clean. Finalized months ago. The funds moved to a new account, not hidden, just private, prepared, executed, like a man ready to be erased from a narrative that had turned hostile. I stared at the screen, at the zeros, and for the first time in years, I felt something tighten in my chest that I couldn't name. Not guilt, not regret, fear, because I'd married a man who never raised his voice, never slammed a door, never played games, and I'd mocked him in public, thinking silence meant weakness. I was wrong. He hadn't just walked out of that dinner. He'd walked out of the entire version of life I thought I controlled. And the scariest part? I didn't even see him go. The first thing I noticed was the silence, not the kind you get when someone's asleep upstairs or when the TV's paused mid-scene. This was a vacuum, no keys on the hook, no scuff marks from his boots by the door. I leaned against the wall and took off my heels, my toes pulsing from the tight straps. I called out, soft, almost playful, "You up?" Like maybe this was still a normal night, like maybe he'd just gone to brush his teeth. No answer. I walked through the house slowly, and the feeling started to claw at me from the ribs out. The closet was the next blow. On his side, nothing. Not a hanger out of place. His shoes, always lined like soldiers, gone. That one flannel he used for everything from painting to raking leaves, missing. It wasn't messy, it was surgical. I opened the drawers, empty, even the one with the old watch I gave him, the broken one he refused to throw out. I checked the bathroom, his razor, his cologne, the little comb he always forgot to rinse, all gone. My side of the bed was untouched, but his, sheets stripped, mattress bare, pillow missing. I didn't panic yet, not really. I told myself maybe he was trying to prove a point, that he'd be back in the morning, that we'd argue, that I'd cry and he'd retreat, and eventually we'd sit across from each other in that aching silence we'd learned to survive in. But then I saw the manila envelope. It wasn't tossed, it was placed, deliberate, center of the kitchen island, under the pendant light like it was staged for a photograph. My name, written in his exacting handwriting, across the front. I held it with both hands. It felt too heavy for a note. Inside, one page. "You like real men. Here's what one looks like when he leaves." No signature, no date, just that line, printed neatly on thick off-white paper, below it a second document. I didn't even understand what I was looking at first. Then the words jumped out. Quitclaim deed, notarized, filed, processed, his name, once on every deed, every joint contract we'd ever signed, gone, removed. The house was mine. It wasn't a gift. It was a message, a final exhale before complete erasure, and that's when the dread started, the slow, sinking kind, the kind that spreads from the back of your throat to the soles of your feet, because I realized this wasn't emotional, it was logistical, legal, executed with the same precision he used to plan our vacations or vet an investment or rearrange the garage in perfect rows of storage bins and tools. I grabbed my phone, no new texts, just old ones from me from days ago, before the dinner, before I'd embarrassed him in front of the only people who still respected him. "Can you pick up wine? The blue shirt's better for tonight. Don't be weird around Mark, just let me lead." He hadn't replied to any of them, not even with a thumbs up. I checked my voicemail, nothing. I called his number, straight to voicemail. That's when I tried to log into the bank account. The one we use for everything, like mortgage, bills, his birthday trip last year to Napa. My access had been revoked, not frozen, not locked out by accident, removed. I tried the joint investment platform. Password changed, email changed. I opened my laptop and pulled up our shared Dropbox. He'd been uploading a folder the week before titled Home Reno Options. Gone. Folder deleted, and a message from the platform, "Shared access has been removed by owner." I closed the lid, sat at the island right across from where the envelope had been, and I realized I wasn't just alone in the house. I was outside the life I thought I was still living, because it hit me he'd planned this, every step, weeks in advance, maybe months. And I never noticed because I didn't think he could do something like this. Not him, not the man who bought me tulips when I cried after watching documentaries, not the man who listened more than he spoke, not the man who never raised his voice, even when I slammed doors. But maybe that was the problem. Maybe I mistook quiet for soft. And now he was gone. Cleanly. Entirely. The only sound in the room was the hum of the refrigerator. And I couldn't even remember what his voice had sounded like when he said, "Game over." The first call went straight to voicemail. I figured he was still angry. Maybe driving. Maybe with a friend. The second rang once, then died. The third didn't even connect. That's when I tried texting. "Can we talk?" No response. "Please, just talk to me." Still nothing. By the seventh message, the panic hadn't set in yet. Not really. I still believed in some version of us, some post-fight rhythm where I'd push too far and he'd go silent, but only for a night. It always came back to a whispered apology in the dark. That's what I thought we were doing again. By message 14, I called his brother. "Hey, is he with you?" A pause, then a sharp, clipped no. He didn't ask why I was calling, didn't offer to take a message, just ended the call. I tried his office next, called reception, used my cheeriest voice like nothing was wrong. Can you transfer me to him? I'm sorry, but Mr. Ellison is no longer with us. I blinked. I'm sorry, what? He resigned 2 weeks ago, left a forwarding address for tax documents only. I swallowed. And the forwarding address? I'm afraid I can't share that. Click. I sat on the edge of my bed and stared at my phone. The photos on my screensaver were all wrong now. Smiles that meant nothing. A man who no longer existed in any form I could reach. I opened his business email. Maybe I'd find something there. A trail. A clue. Auto reply. This inbox is no longer active. For inquiries, please contact admin@rosenthalcap.com. Rosenthal Capital? I had no idea what that even was. I Googled the name. There it was, a boutique investment advisory firm, downtown, sleek website, quiet reputation. No mention of him, but I knew him well enough to know he wouldn't be on the splash page. He never needed spotlight to prove presence. I logged into our joint financial portal, the one I hadn't checked in weeks. I hadn't needed to. We were creatures of habit, bills on autopay, transfers like clockwork, except the login didn't work. I reset the password, entered my verification, and what I saw hit like ice in my lungs. The accounts weren't just empty. They were closed, not drained, not tampered with, split, legally. There, in the transaction history, was the last recorded movement, his half transferred to an account under his name only, on the night of the dinner. The same night I'd laughed at him, the same night I'd settled into another man's lap and made a show of dismissing him in front of people who had once respected him. I scrolled further. All the markers were there. The paperwork, the legal documentation, even the timestamp of the notary session. He hadn't walked out in anger. He'd walked out according to schedule. I checked our investment portfolio next. A separate login. I hadn't touched it in months, trusting him to manage it like he always had. The holdings had been split, restructured, and transferred. Every move approved, documented, and finalized with quiet precision. I checked the house utilities, all auto payments previously assigned to him, now redirected or set to expire at the end of the billing cycle. The internet bill still had my name, but I couldn't remember the password to our router. He'd set it up. He'd handled all of that. And now, even the Wi-Fi felt like it didn't belong to me. My hand was trembling by the time I opened the filing cabinet in our hallway. The one with all the old tax returns, insurance documents, warranties. His file folders were gone, removed cleanly. My sections left intact, untouched. He hadn't sabotaged me. He'd just extracted himself. No rage, no vengeance, just total strategic erasure. That night, I sat on the floor with a bottle of red I didn't remember opening, staring at my phone. I'd sent 31 messages by then, all unread. I scrolled to our last thread. The last message from him had been, short, weeks before the dinner. Do you want me to pick up dessert? I never answered. I was late at work, distracted, in a meeting with the same investor I'd later humiliate him in front of. I kept thinking maybe if I'd answered, maybe if I'd said, yes, pick up dessert, he'd still be here. But the truth settled over me heavier than the wine. He'd been gone long before I noticed, and I was never going to find him by chasing his shadow. He didn't slam a door. He vanished, on purpose. It was a Wednesday afternoon, gray and dull, and I was sitting at my desk pretending to focus on spreadsheets I hadn't touched in hours. My friend Maddie sent a message first, a casual, guess who I just saw, followed by a photo. No caption, no warning. The image loaded slowly, as if it knew the weight it carried. A large conference room gleaming with soft lighting and money. A backdrop stamped with logos. Rows of chairs, lanyards, the hum of deals being born. And there he was, standing just slightly off-center, like he didn't need to claim the spotlight to be the center of gravity. Charcoal suit, tailored, tie knotted sharp, posture easy, like nothing could rattle him anymore. The man who once spent 5 minutes deciding which black socks didn't have lint was now effortless. But it wasn't just him that stopped my breath. The badge on his chest, Strategic Advisor, Rosenthal Capital. And beside him, angled slightly in his direction, A woman in a crimson blazer, her hair tied back, eyes focused, confident, like she belonged. She wasn't touching him, but she didn't need to. There was something in the angle of her body, the proximity, the ease, like they were a pair already. Then I saw his hand resting at his side, relaxed, no ring. I stared at that detail longer than I should have. Zoomed in, rechecked, no indent, no tan line, just clean bare skin. I hadn't taken mine off. Why hadn't I taken mine off? I blinked hard and realized I'd stopped breathing. My chest was tight, my mouth dry. The world hadn't collapsed, not visibly, but something in me cracked. The kind of crack you can't plaster, the kind that keeps spreading when you're not looking. I texted Maddie, where was this? Some VC summit, downtown Hyatt, yesterday. I think he was speaking. Didn't know you guys were on a break? I stared at her message. On a break. That was how it looked to the outside world. A pause, a space between chapters. But this wasn't a pause. He hadn't stopped. He'd leapt forward. He hadn't run to a bar, or a rebound, or some messy coping mechanism. He'd built a new trajectory, quietly, strategically, Rosenthal Capital. I looked them up again. Boutique, yes, but loaded with talent. A circle of former executives, ex-founders, sharp minds. They didn't take just anyone. You didn't land there by accident. I wondered how long they'd been talking to him, how long he'd been planning this next move. While I was busy scheduling fundraisers, curating our social feeds, making comments that chipped at him with every half joke and public cut, he'd been positioning himself, not to escape me, to outgrow me. That's when jealousy gave way to something deeper, older, fear. Because for the first time I saw the whole picture. He wasn't retreating. He wasn't grieving. He had become a version of himself I'd never imagined, one that didn't need me, or my validation, or the world we'd built together brick by brick over 10 years. And I hadn't just lost him. I'd made myself irrelevant to who he had become. I closed the photo, but it was already burned into the back of my eyes. His suit, her blazer, that badge, no ring. I stared at my own hand, twisted the band, slid it halfway off, then stopped. I wasn't ready, not because I still loved him, or maybe I did, in the way someone loves the house they grew up in, but because removing it meant accepting the truth. He hadn't just left. He'd won. And the worst part? He didn't do it to hurt me. He did it because I no longer had anything he wanted. He was on the other side of town, in a room full of power and vision, and I was here, still clinging to a silence he no longer owed me. It came in a thick envelope, hand-delivered by a courier who didn't ask for a signature. Just handed it to me and walked off. The kind of quiet delivery that doesn't feel like news. It feels like an ending. I brought it inside, heart ticking faster than I wanted to admit. The label on the front said, Final Transfer Documents, and I stared at that word, final, like it might change its meaning if I blinked enough times. I slid it open with the kitchen knife, the one he used to sharpen obsessively every few weeks. Inside, the paperwork was pristine, a full deed transfer, filed, sealed, irrevocable. The house, ours, or rather his pride project, the one he gutted and rebuilt from scratch, was now fully mine. My first reaction was relief, stupid, instinctive relief, like maybe this was an olive branch, a sign that he wasn't as cold as the silence suggested, that somewhere inside he still wanted me to land on my feet, still saw me as something worth salvaging. I even smiled, briefly, maybe too broadly. Then I saw the staples, 3 documents attached behind the deed. Unmarked at first glance, I flipped them, expecting boilerplate disclosures or transfer clauses, but they weren't. The first was a pending lawsuit. Water intrusion due to improper drainage installation. Claimant, the neighbor to the north. Estimated damages, $37,800. Filed 4 months ago. Never addressed. I blinked. The second, breach of contractor agreement, a local builder. Apparently we'd canceled mid-project during the second guest bath remodel. I remembered the shouting match vaguely. He'd handled it, or so I thought. Estimated claim, $21,000 plus legal fees, and then the third one stopped my breath cold. Zoning violation, non-permitted structural expansion, city ordinance reference, fine up to $75,000. Failure to respond may result in forced demolition of the affected section. My fingers started to shake. I read them again, slower this time. The dates, the stamps, the deadlines already missed, the polite but firm legal language that promised escalation. I looked at the house around me, the sunken living room we'd designed, the custom windows he'd insisted on installing himself, the open-plan kitchen that made me feel like I lived in a design magazine. I remembered the arguments, the dust, the chaos of that year-long renovation, and now it was a trap, a house of straw, a beautifully staged liability. I sat down on the edge of the staircase, documents in hand, and stared at the wall where we used to hang our anniversary photos. The nails were still there. The frames were gone. He'd gutted this place again. Only this time, not to build it better. He'd turned it into a sinking asset, and he'd done it silently, legally, and cleanly. I ran upstairs, opened the home office drawer, and found the folder he once kept with every contractor agreement, every permit, every invoice. It was empty. Not even the labeled tabs remained. I called the city, gave them the case number from the zoning violation. The clerk on the phone confirmed it, explained the process, then added, "You really should have responded earlier, ma'am. This one's been active for a while." A while? How long had he known? Had he already planned to walk when the first notice came? Had he watched me walk through this house barefoot and oblivious, sipping wine, laughing on calls with friends while the foundation was metaphorically rotting under my feet? I imagined him watching. Not with cruelty, but with detachment, because this wasn't revenge, it was accounting. I was the one who'd made him feel small in public, powerless in private. I took his silence as permission, took his stability as static, and he let me, until he didn't. Now I was holding the cost of that mistake. 3 lawsuits, 1 crumbling house, and a mortgage that now bore only my name. He'd handed me exactly what I wanted, a house of my own, and he knew I'd never checked the beams, never looked at the crawl space, never noticed the cracks, because I'd been too busy trying to impress people who'd never even stepped foot inside. Now I couldn't move, couldn't rent it, couldn't sell it, without disclosing the pending claims. I pressed my palms into my eyes, trying not to cry, not out of sadness, out of awe. He hadn't just walked away. He'd made sure I'd feel exactly what it was like to be handed everything I claimed to want, too late and too poisoned to hold. I didn't even know I was still holding onto the idea of someone being on my side until they weren't. The first time it truly hit me was with his brother. I'd always thought we had a quiet understanding, an unspoken civility. Birthdays, cookouts, the occasional laugh over holiday wine. So when I called, voice low, already braced for awkwardness, I still believed he'd at least meet me halfway. "He won't talk to me," I said, trying to keep my tone steady as if this was all some passing misunderstanding. "Can you just tell him I'm not trying to fight?" There was a long pause. Then he said flatly, "Why should he?" Just like that. No anger, no cruelty, just the cold weight of a bridge burned. I sat in silence, the phone still pressed to my ear, long after the line went dead. Next, I tried my father. It was late. He always answered, even if he didn't want to. His voice cracked with sleep. "I just wanted to hear your voice," I started. He said nothing. "I think I might have gone too far," I added, laughing weakly, hoping to fill the space. Still nothing. Then, finally, in a voice that wasn't angry, just tired, "You embarrassed him? And yourself?" The words landed like stones, not shouted, not meant to hurt, just spoken aloud for the first time. True things always sound heavier when someone else says them. I didn't sleep that night. My thoughts spun like a carousel I couldn't get off. I kept seeing his face at that dinner, not angry, not even hurt, just finished. And I realized something awful. He hadn't retaliated. He hadn't tried to ruin me. He'd simply told the truth by leaving. And now the truth was being echoed everywhere I turned. At work, the air shifted. At first, it was subtle. The receptionist no longer made small talk. The barista downstairs forgot my usual order. The analyst who used to light up when I passed her desk avoided eye contact. Then came the whisper. It wasn't even meant to reach me. In the hallway near the elevators, I turned the corner too early. Two colleagues were mid-conversation. One leaned in and whispered, "So, divorced yet?" The other smirked. I froze, not because they said it, but because they were right to. I didn't say anything. Just kept walking, pretending I hadn't heard, even as the heat crawled up my neck and settled in my ears. The kind of heat that comes not from anger, but exposure. Later, I sat in a meeting and watched one of our junior leads present a pitch I'd helped shape. I gave a comment, concise and sharp like I always did, but no one looked at me, not even once. It was as if my voice didn't register anymore, as if my authority had been stripped the same way he stripped his name from the house, the accounts, the future. Yeah, I went home that night and called my mother. She always had an opinion, always barked louder than the room. I needed that edge, that certainty. Just once. "Mom," I said, holding back everything. "I think I messed up." There was a silence, then only this, a sigh. Not dismissive, not dramatic. Just weary, as if she already knew, as if she'd expected this call. I looked around the kitchen, the marble countertops I once begged him to approve, the ones he spent weekends installing himself because the contractors were too slow. I used to mock him for being so hands-on, for not trusting professionals. Now I couldn't even trust myself to open an envelope without dreading what was inside. The shame didn't come all at once. It crept. Every cold glance, every awkward pause, every person who looked away the moment I entered a room. I was no longer the woman at the center of attention. I was the subject of quiet conversations, the object lesson in what happens when you mistake loyalty for permanence. Because now I understood. It wasn't just him who left. The loyalty that once surrounded me, his family, my family, our friends, didn't disappear. It recalibrated. It went with him. And I was left standing in the shell of a house, a life, a reputation that now belonged to no one. The envelope was plain, no logo, no handwriting, no postage, just slid under my front door like it had been placed there by the wind. I picked it up without thinking. It didn't feel like legal papers. Too light. Not a letter, no return address, no note, no markings at all. Inside, one single photo. The moment it slid into my palm, my stomach dropped. I didn't need to see it twice. I knew it before my eyes fully processed it. I remembered the shoes I was wearing, the way the lights glared just slightly off the champagne flutes, the way the investor leaned back, that smug grin on his face, and me, perched in his lap, head tilted, mid-laugh, full, open, unmistakably entertained by my own performance. I looked radiant, alive, and cruel. Beside me, frozen in perfect stillness, was him, standing by his wine glass, untouched, half turned toward the table, one hand still resting on the back of the chair he never got to sit in again. It wasn't the posture that broke me, it was the expression, not angry, not humiliated, just silent. He looked like a man who had already left. I hadn't seen him that way at the time. I hadn't noticed his eyes, or how quiet the room had become once the laugh faded. I'd been too busy soaking up the reaction, the attention, the intoxicating power of being the woman everyone looked at, and not the man they looked through. My fingers curled around the edge of the photo. I wanted to rip it, but I couldn't. I turned it over. One line, written in that clean, slanted handwriting I used to trace with my fingers in bed on lazy Sunday mornings. 10 years of loyalty, erased in 10 seconds. No name, no date, no threat, just the truth. The kind of truth that doesn't yell, it whispers, it settles deep. I sat down on the kitchen floor, knees pulled in, the photo resting on my lap. I thought back to the day the picture was taken, the hours leading up to that dinner. He'd helped me review the pitch deck, brought coffee into my office without asking. I'd barely acknowledged it, rushing through my slides, correcting his phrasing on a few sections. I'd snapped at him for including a market risk I didn't think mattered. He'd apologized. He always apologized. Even when he was right. At the dinner he stood when I did. Moved his chair to let me through, lifted his glass when I reached for mine. He'd come ready to celebrate me, to support me, to honor the work I'd done, and maybe, quietly, the work we'd built together, and I'd use that moment to gut him, not in private, not in a fight, but on stage, in front of power, because I wanted to feel big, because I'd started to believe that his quietness made him small. The memory hit harder than any of the lawsuits, colder than the night I realized the accounts were empty. I had humiliated him, and this photo, this was not a warning. It was a record, proof that he hadn't screamed or stormed or shattered anything. He'd just remembered, down to the second, and that made it worse, because he didn't need to destroy me, he just needed to hold up a mirror. I sat there for over an hour, the photo still in my hands. The ring on my finger suddenly felt too tight. I slid it off without thinking, stared at the indentation it left, the absence already beginning to form, and I knew then, with a clarity that wrapped itself around my chest, like steel. He had left long before the dinner, but he had waited for me to see it, and now I had. The envelope was thick, embossed, and expensive, the kind you don't throw out without at least opening. No sender listed on the front, just my name in black serif letters on smooth white. I slid it open over the sink, one hand still wet from rinsing dishes, and pulled out the heavy cardstock inside. Rosenthal Capital, annual gala venue, the Glass House, downtown dress, formal guest, my full name. I read it 3 times, then a 4th. It didn't make sense. I hadn't spoken to anyone at Rosenthal. I barely knew what they did until I started digging through Google weeks ago. There was no +1 line, no contact for RSVPs, no handwritten note, just my name. It felt like a trap or a test, but something about it, maybe the weight of the paper, maybe the precise way my name was printed, maybe the fact that it made no sense, pulled me in, or maybe I was just that desperate to be near the last place he might still exist. I said nothing to anyone. Booked a car, spent 2 hours deciding between dresses that no longer felt right, settled on one he used to like, deep navy, low back, clean lines. I told myself it wasn't for him, it was for memory. But the mirror didn't lie. I arrived 15 minutes before the doors opened. Guests in tuxedos and gowns trickled in, escorted by hosts with clipboards and perfect posture. When I gave my name, the woman checked quickly and smiled. Of course, right this way. She didn't ask who invited me. Inside, the space glowed, floor-to-ceiling windows, suspended lights like floating stars, waiters carrying trays of sparkling wine and impossibly small hors d'oeuvres. Conversations buzzed, low and expensive. I scanned the room. He wasn't there, or maybe he was, but in the pockets I didn't dare approach. I took a glass and stood by the edge of the room, just close enough to look like I belonged, just far enough to avoid recognition. A few people glanced my way, but no one said anything, no one approached, and then the lights shifted. A voice took the stage, not the usual MC drone, deeper, more grounded. I turned, and my heart stopped. It was him, standing at the podium under a single spotlight, calm, still, poised like he'd been born there, like the weight of what he'd been through had crystallized into something unshakable. No tie tonight, just an open collar under a crisp jacket, the kind of look you only earn when you've stopped needing to prove yourself. He waited for silence, didn't rush, let the room fall quiet around him. Sometimes, he said, voice carrying without force, walking away is the beginning of everything. A soft wave of murmurs rolled through the crowd. Heads nodded. A few people clapped. I stood frozen. He didn't say my name, didn't speak of betrayal or endings or lessons learned. He just spoke of becoming, of clarity, of knowing when something or someone no longer fits, and having the courage not to fight it, but to leave it behind. He was graceful, thoughtful, and terrifyingly whole. When he stepped down, people leaned in to shake his hand. A woman in a sleek black dress touched his arm and laughed at something he said. He smiled, not performative, not forced, real. He moved through the room with gravity, and he never once looked in my direction, not even a flicker. I sat near the exit, my champagne untouched, the stem warm in my hand. I wasn't invisible, I was deliberately unacknowledged, because this wasn't about me. It never was. He hadn't come to make a point. He didn't invite me to show what I'd lost. He invited me to witness what he'd become without me. And somehow that made it worse, because if he had tried to impress me or punish me or even remind me, I could have told myself the story wasn't over. But this was the final chapter, spoken not in anger, but in the language of indifference. He'd closed the book, and left me sitting in the audience, still flipping pages that no longer turned. I waited near the valet, pretending I had somewhere to be. It was cold, the kind of cold that crept through silk and skin and memory. My heels pinched, my clutch felt too small in my hand, like a joke purse for a life I didn't carry anymore. He came out laughing, easy, warm, surrounded by colleagues in dark coats and scarves, their breath puffing in clouds under the glow of the marquee. Someone clapped him on the back. Another handed him something, maybe a card, maybe a deal. He nodded, thanked them, then turned toward the line of waiting cars. He hadn't seen me yet. Not really. But the moment he did, I saw it happen. His smile disappeared, not in anger, not in disgust, just gone, like a light turned off. Like he'd taken a breath and remembered I was a chapter already closed. He didn't stop walking, just slowed. I stepped forward. I was wrong, I said, voice low, too low, but it was all I had left. That night, he didn't let me finish. You made your choice, he said. Just like that. No rise in tone, no emphasis, truth laid bare. He glanced back at the other, still chatting, laughing, living, then looked at me once more. This time, there was no pain, no resentment, only distance. I was the practice round, he said, eyes steady, not the player. He turned, not abruptly, not dramatically, just enough to let the cold rush in where connection used to be. I didn't move, couldn't. I heard the crunch of his shoes on the gravel, the car door open, then close, the engine pull away. I stood alone under the awning, the city spinning forward around me. I wanted to scream. I wanted to cry. I wanted to collapse and make a scene so he'd look back, even once. But I didn't, because I finally understood something I'd refused to see. He hadn't slammed the door on me. He'd locked it quietly, from the other side, and thrown away the key. The house was too quiet, not the comforting kind, not the kind you settle into after a long night. This was the kind that presses against your chest and makes you check your phone every 4 minutes, even though nothing has changed. 29 missed calls, all mine. His name lit up my screen again and again, only to vanish into silence. I tried text, email, even sent a LinkedIn message, something I hadn't touched in years, still nothing. I couldn't sit still. My mind kept playing old loops, his laugh in the kitchen, the way he adjusted the thermostat without saying anything when he knew I was cold, the sound of his keys in the door, the rhythm of someone who never asked to be seen but was always there, and then suddenly wasn't. By 2 a.m., I grabbed my coat and drove to his old place, the one we shared, the one where I'd once picked out tiles for the bathroom and rolled my eyes when he insisted on under-cabinet lighting. The porch light was a different hue now, new cars in the driveway, a potted plant I didn't recognize by the door. I rang the bell anyway, once, then again. A woman answered, middle-aged, polite, but guarded. "Can I help you?" I stood there for a second, not knowing what to say. "Sorry," I mumbled. "Wrong address." But it wasn't. It used to be mine. Ours. By dawn, I was parked outside the mirrored glass building downtown. Rosenthal Capital's new headquarters, their logo etched in gold near the entrance, crisp and smug. Inside, the lobby was sterile and gleaming, staffed by a young man in a navy blazer who didn't look old enough to shave. "I'm here to see—" "I'm sorry," he said before I even finished. "He's unavailable. I'm not leaving until I speak to him." He pressed something on his desk. "You'll need to step aside." I did not until a second guard walked up. Older, wiser, kinder, maybe, still firm. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but he left instructions not to receive visitors." "Just give him a note," I said, desperation lacing my voice like static. "Tell him it's me. Please." The older guard looked at me for a long second, then stepped away. Came back with a white envelope. No markings, no name, just sealed. He handed it to me gently, and then I did it. I cracked. Palms flat against the glass wall of the building, I pressed until it hurt, until my breath fogged the surface, until I could see the silhouette of the reception desk, the glow of interior lights, the faint trace of a hallway where he might have stood once. I knocked, once, then again, and then I pounded, not screaming, not breaking, just desperate. A beat passed, then two. No response, only my own breath echoing back at me. I opened the envelope right there on the sidewalk. Inside was a single sheet of heavy paper, his handwriting, clean as ever. You taught me what disrespect looks like in daylight. I chose the dark, where rebuilds happen. There was something else tucked inside, a photo. Him and her, the woman in the crimson blazer, standing on a rooftop, skyline behind them, glasses raised in a quiet toast. The banner behind them read, Launch Event, Solmer Partners, and beneath their names, co-founders. He'd done it. He'd built something new, something clean, something alive. Without me. I stared at the photo until my fingers went numb, and then I heard it, not from the building, not from any voice around me, but from inside my own skull, a phrase I had once thrown like a dagger, proud and certain and laughing. You don't understand the game of real men. The echo was deafening now, not because it was cruel, but because it had been true. I didn't understand. Not then. And I had never bothered to try. I sank to the pavement, the city waking around me, engines revving, doors unlocking, another day spinning forward. But mine had stopped. He didn't need to punish me. He didn't need to curse or shout or destroy. He just needed to walk and show me what a real man does when he's finally done explaining why he matters.